Police say that this car crash, which killed an elderly woman, was murder and arson. The driver, the victim's daughter, insisted it was an accident. Two fire investigators came to two entirely different conclusions. Was it an accident or murder? You decide. Omega, Georgia is literally a one-stoplight town, surrounded by peanut farms and cotton fields. On August 18, 1996, a hot, quiet Sunday, a man driving down a remote country road saw a woman standing on a small bridge, waving frantically. The woman was Sheila Bryan.
This guy jumped out of the car. And he said, "What's the matter, what's the matter?" And I said, "My mother's in the car, I think the car's on fire."
The car was down in a ditch, and Sheila's 82-year-old mother was trapped inside. From the bridge, you could see the smoke coming out of the car. The man ran to a nearby house to get help. By the time firefighters arrived, the car was an inferno. When the fire was put out, they found Frida Weeks dead inside the car. She had been unable to get out.
I just remember getting nauseated, throwing up, and the next thing I remember is just lots of people.
Sheila told police that she and her mother were on their way to the local cemetery to visit her father's grave. She said she was momentarily distracted and accidentally drove off the road into the ditch just before reaching the bridge.
It was about a 30-foot embankment, which was very steep. And when I got to the bottom, there was a big jolt. I was trying to get the car turned off, and it wouldn't turn off. Somehow, I finally got it off. And the keys, they dropped out of my hand because I had jerked them, and they dropped out of my hand. I kept telling her, I says, "I'll be right back, I'll be right back."
Sheila ran around the car to the passenger side door to try to get her mother out, but the door was locked. Sheila said she ran up the embankment and flagged down a passing vehicle. She said when she looked down, she saw smoke coming out of the car for the first time. When police arrived, they noticed some irregularities.
That car traveled about 60 feet down the grassy shoulder of the road prior to making a right-hand turn and traveling about 30 feet down this embankment where it came to its final resting point perpendicular to the road in the ditch. And then we started looking at, there were no skid marks, there were no signs in the grassy shoulder that there was an abrupt turn of any type.
And the front of the vehicle showed no signs of damage consistent with running down an embankment.
There were no scrape marks under the bumper, under the undercarriage. The plastic cowling under the bumper had no damage to it whatsoever. All signs that were indicative that this car traveled down that embankment very slowly.
Also suspicious, the door to the gas tank was open and the gas cap was missing. No autopsy was performed on Frida Weeks, but the toxicology results were puzzling. Most people who die from smoke inhalation have carbon monoxide levels in their blood of 45 to 85%. But the carbon monoxide level in Frida's blood was 0.
Lab results showed that there was no carbon monoxide in the victim's blood, which could be indicative that she was not alive at the time of the fire.
If Frida Weeks was dead before the fire started, how did she die? The local sheriff's department brought in outside experts to help investigate the car accident and fire which killed Frida Weeks. The engine and exhaust system showed little fire damage, but the passenger compartment was destroyed. It appeared that the fire started on the floor of the driver's side because investigators found burn patterns consistent with the use of an accelerant.
There were also burn patterns that protruded through or over the driver's door threshold, which could be indicative that the door was open at some point during the time of the fire.
The debris inside the car was tested for accelerants, but tests came back negative.
And it's not uncommon in arson cases, especially where fire departments have responded, put a tremendous amount of water on the actual fire scene.
The only personal items found in the car were a wallet and the charred remains of a claw hammer. The possibility that the hammer might have been the murder weapon led investigators to exhume Frida Weeks' body for an autopsy.
That's when I heard that they were suspicioning arson. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, I just could not even believe where they could even come up with that.
And the investigation angered Sheila's husband, too.
Mr. Bryan became more upset and made the statement that, well, you guys need to do whatever you need to do, and you need to do it because there's $100,000 at stake, and the insurance company's not going to pay until you get done with your investigation.
Sheila's husband was referring to the liability coverage of his car insurance, which he believed would pay them $100,000 for Frida's death.
Which kind of corresponded with the amount he told us there in his driveway.
The autopsy found no injuries consistent with the use of a claw hammer. The surprising news was that Frida's lungs and nasal passages did not have any soot, which usually happens when someone is alive and breathes smoke during a fire. The medical examiner found evidence of severe coronary artery disease and listed the probable cause of Frida's death as cardiac standstill.
Dr. Clark said that she was probably alive at the time of the fire and may have taken 1 or 2 gasps after that fire was started and then died.
The medical examiner did not rule the death a homicide. Nevertheless, prosecutors believed that the fire was deliberately set and charged Sheila Bryan with arson and murder. Sheila pled not guilty. At the trial, prosecutors said the motive for the crime was money, that Sheila killed her mother and staged the crime scene to collect a death benefit from her car insurance.
I said, that's ridiculous. I said, this is something that you're required to have by law to be able to drive a vehicle. And 2, there was no way for me to even collect any money from them.
Prosecutors knew that the car insurance wouldn't have paid anything after Frida's death, but believe that Sheila and her husband were unaware of that at the time of the incident. To prove it, prosecutors pointed to the statement Sheila's husband allegedly made to investigators.
It was the state's position that they intended to collect on that insurance money. And the reason the state thought that is first because of what Carlos Bryan told them, that was their intention, and secondly, because they had hired an attorney to collect the money.
At the trial, Sheila took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony, however, differed in some respects from the statement she gave to police immediately after the accident.
When she got on the stand, she told this story about stopping on the edge of the embankment and teetering.
I was sitting there and I said, I was going to try and get out. I opened the car door and I still had my seatbelt on. And when I did, the car door come back and hit my arm.
And then the car rolled down the ditch bank, which was not anything that she had said at the time of the accident.
Sheila first told investigators that her mother showed no signs of distress after the accident. On the witness stand, she said her mother wasn't responsive.
I told Mama, I says, I'll be back in just a minute. She didn't respond. Well, I thought she had passed out.
When she got on the witness stand, that story had changed remarkably. And I think it didn't ring true to those jurors. But it was testimony about the burn patterns that I think sealed her fate.
The prosecution's arson expert said those burn patterns were consistent with a fire started with an accelerant. The jury found Sheila Bryan guilty of arson and murder. She was sentenced to life in prison.
I could not believe that this had actually happened. I said, why am I here? I don't understand. I even looked around for a rusty screw to cut my wrist. I said, I cannot let my children be exposed to something like this the rest of their life. And then all of a sudden, something come over me. And I said, God, if I'm here to help somebody, then you show me what you want me to do. And I had a peace about me after that.
Sheila's friends and supporters believed in her innocence and raised funds to hire an independent fire investigator to look into the case. And the person they found also happened to be an outspoken critic of arson investigations, Dr. Gerald Hurst.
You had a woman who had a close relationship with her mother and plenty of people who knew about this relationship. They said that the reason that she had torched her mother was because the mother was getting old, wearing a diaper, and she was just too much trouble. You see, it just doesn't fit.
It was real clear to me that this case had divided that community in this area, half believing she was guilty and half believing that she was innocent.
After Sheila Bryan was convicted of murdering her mother in a car fire, Sheila's friends and family hired Dr. Gerald Hurst to conduct an independent investigation.
I read the original investigation reports and all of the police work done in connection with the fire, and then I read the trial testimony, and I found that there was a lot of bunco involved in the prosecution.
Sheila's car was a Ford. Hurst and his colleague, Chris Bloom, quickly discovered that there had been a number of suspicious fires in similar Ford vehicles. The problem was the ignition switch, a box of electrical contacts on the steering column. By turning the key, different contacts in the switch start the car and turns on the electrical system.
And it's a small little component. You don't normally would even think about it, but that little component has been the source of at least alleged 8,000 fires.
Many of these cars caught fire while sitting in garages and parking lots, and some while being driven down the road. In 1996, Ford issued one of the largest car recalls in history. A lead in the ignition switch had electricity flowing through it constantly. A plastic box separated the leads, but in some cases, carbon buildup caused the circuit to arc.
It's creating a circuit where a circuit was not designed. And as a result, there's overheating that's occurring, and that overheating will result in the ignition of the surrounding combustibles, the plastics and such.
Dr. Hurst and Chris Bloom made another interesting discovery. The task force at the Ford Motor Company that confirmed the ignition switch problem was headed by Ralph Newell. Mr. Newell was also a fire expert and was the star witness for the prosecution in Sheila's trial.
I'm not saying that he did anything wrong, but I'm saying he was under heavy influence. He was getting, I think, about $150,000 a year, or at least that year, and certain amounts in other years, working for Ford Motor Company.
The key thing I noted was that not a single person mentioned the ignition switch in the case. And it didn't matter whether they said, I examined the ignition switch and eliminated it as cause. I looked at the ignition switch, there was nothing wrong. There was no mention of it.
This was particularly interesting since Sheila's first statement to police mentioned her inability to remove her car keys after the accident.
Ms. Bryan, after running off the road, tried to get the keys out of the ignition and couldn't get the keys out. That indicates that you have something wrong with the ignition lock or the ignition switch.
Sheila's car was a 1987 Ford Cougar, but the recall only went back to 1988. Bloom and Dr. Hurst suspected that Sheila's car had the same ignition switch.
This is a recalled switch from an '88 Ford Escort. The important thing to note is the model number on the switch. When I pulled the large wiring loom out of the '87 Cougar and examined this switch, you can see the model numbers are the same.
But what caused the burn patterns in the interior, which prosecution experts said was from an accelerant? This steering column, cover, and carpet are from the same model and year car as Sheila Bryan's. Gerald Hurst believes the switch inside the steering column overheated and the plastic cover ignited, melted, and dripped like this one, burning down through the carpet like a liquid accelerant.
Now, if this were in a real automobile, you would also begin dripping the same molten flaming plastic on the seat, which contains polyurethane foam, and that would take off like the proverbial house afire. Anytime a fire consumes the interior of a car, you're going to have masses of flammable plastics that melt and flow. They themselves, the plastics, become, in effect, liquid accelerants.
Hurst also said a gap in the door seal allowed melted plastic from the seats, doors, and dashboard to flow under the door in not one, but two spots.
It was not a liquid accelerant that produced it. I'm quite confident it was the plastic, but that was of less importance to me than the fact that the prosecutor and all the king's horses and all the king's men would not be able to produce that pattern with gasoline.
The information should have been presented to the jury. Hey, this is a known problem, that it's a rare problem, but it's a known problem that catches fire.
After 10 months in prison, the Georgia Supreme Court unanimously voted to overturn Sheila's conviction. The court stated the testimony that inferred there was an insurance motive was improper, and any financial motive was tenuous at best.
I immediately got on my knees and prayed and thanked God for that, because that just does not happen. It does not happen in the length of time for me to even get an appeal. Usually people stay in there for years and years before they even get an appeal. So I was very well blessed with that.
Just as Sheila was released from prison, she had another surprise. Prosecutors for the state of Georgia said they would try her again for murder and arson. Due to extensive publicity, the second trial would be held in neighboring Thomas County.
And it was quite naturally a battle of the experts.
But which experts would the jury believe? Converse Bright was the new defense attorney representing Sheila Bryan at her second murder trial.
There was no trauma involved, and the blood test and the autopsy showed that this lady was dead before the fire started, most likely by a heart attack. If the jury accepted that, then that ended the case right there.
But the cause of the fire was again the prosecution's focus, claiming Sheila Bryan had set the car fire by pouring and lighting some type of liquid accelerant.
It either came out of the tank or she brought it there. There's no container found. There's no instrument like a siphon or whatever.
This time, Sheila's defense relied on Dr. Hurst's opinion for what caused the deadly fire.
An expert witness in a case performs several functions. Obviously, he testifies and gives expert opinion. And he also can help prepare cross-examination by pointing out fallacies and foibles in the other side's position.
Ralph Newell, The prosecution's star witness in the first trial admitted he had worked for the Ford Motor Company on the task force investigating Ford's past ignition switch problems. But Newell insisted he eliminated the switch in Sheila's car as the cause of the fire. Newell admitted, however, that he did not photograph or document his analysis of the switch in his report. Without the insurance motive, the prosecution argued that Sheila had grown tired of caring for her 82-year-old mother.
They were all one very close-knit family. The testimony was unanimous about that. There was no dissent to that.
After a 4-day trial, the jury deliberated for just under 3 hours before finding Sheila Bryan not guilty.
I just thank you, Lord.
Well, you could cite this case as an example of the system failing in that she did 10 months in jail for something she didn't do. Or you could cite it as an example of the system succeeding because it corrected itself.
2 different trials, 2 different verdicts. The town of Omega will never be the same.
There were heated debates about her guilt or her innocence up until the first trial. And they continued, of course, after she was convicted and went to prison. And they continue to this day.
But Sheila Bryan is a free woman and gives the credit to forensic science.
What made the difference? Having a very credible expert that believed in what he was doing and what he was saying.
This was a case of forensic evidence, whether it be medical or automobile. This was what this case was all about, was forensic evidence.